Okay, folks, so as I mentioned, we are going to use Microsoft Excel, and I'm going to start with a table that I created out of two existing tables from the Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Immigration, the statistics. Now, for the purposes of this activity, I am going to, we can obviously decide to look at this in a number of different ways. So in this particular instance, I'm going to be looking at, what I'll do is I'll look at, let's say, a year of data. Now there's a few different ways we could do this. We could do this by year, we could do it by jurisdiction. I will start here, well, let's see. I think I'll look at it. I think I'll look at a specific jurisdiction actually, and so we'll start by in order to do that, what I would need to start by doing is isolating kind of a single set of data, so a single jurisdiction of data. So you can see that I have data from 1998. This still says to 2007 because I haven't edited it. This is actually 2016. So again, remember that I manually concatenated this data. That is joined two sets of data together. The original files only had one decade's worth. And it's always nice, I mean, basically if you're going to try to analyze a data set for things like central tendency or any kind of pattern, right? If you're trying to establish a trend or understand the context, you need a sort of a minimum quantity of data. And you're usually looking at least 10 or 20 years is a good place to look if you're dealing with annualized data. So I'm going to look at Atlanta. Maybe I'll just look at the total. I'll look at the total arrests. So what I'm going to do here to start with is I'm actually just using my mouse holding down the Shift key, and I'm going to do some editing to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this data. I'm going to create a new table, and I'm going to use a paste special function, which is going to let me actually transpose that data from being rows to columns. This is a really handy thing to know. It can be seem difficult otherwise. You obviously never want to get into the position of manually transcribing things. We are likely to generate, whoops, that didn't work. Why didn't that work? Likely to generate errors in that case. So why does my total arrests look wrong if I do that? Aha, okay, so here's a really good, this is great. So you can see right here that this is saying so you notice that when I pasted this, right, if I came back over here and I pasted, I tried to transpose this data. You notice that there was, whoops, well anyway, that there were blanks. The reason why there were blanks is because what's in this cell, right, it appears to be the number, 123,663. Right, that is the apparent value, but the contents of the cell are actually a formula. So this is really common in Microsoft Excel, and for good reason. And I apologize because I actually realize now that this is probably very difficult to see. Let me, and I'll pump up the font size in a moment. But the point is here simply that the actual contents of the cell are the formula, which is a sum. Okay, Microsoft Excel, as with other spreadsheet programs, implements a lot of formulas, and what these formulas let us do, obviously, is perform calculations, have the program automatically perform calculations for us. Generally speaking, this is a good thing, and we want to use formulas wherever applicable. And the reason why is because let's say that we found an error or correction to the data, we would be able to update the value simply by updating that one data point, and then things like totals and calculations would all update automatically because they're being calculated kind of like on the fly by the program. What that means in this case, however, is that because this is not a hard number, but in fact a sum, is that we need to do two different things in order to actually get the data values to transpose to the next spreadsheet. The first is we need to give it that transpose command, but we also need to give it a command which is paste values. So from this submenu, I can do a bunch of different things. So I can say transpose, but I can also say, instead of paste all, I can choose paste values. And what that's going to do is it's going to tell Excel, look, I don't want the formula to be in here because the formula, now that I've removed it, now that I've taken this data point out of the entire spreadsheet, is going to be meaningless. I want you to take the value, the result of that calculation, and paste it instead. And so when I do this, now I actually get those numbers to appear. So I'm just going to get rid of my blanks here. So I'm going to say this program year. This is total arrests, right? So pretty straightforward data set now. Not a lot going on in a sense, right? We just have a year and a total number. And what I'm going to do for legibility's sake here is pump up the font size. Let's go to 24 and see. So hopefully, yeah, that's sorry, maybe that's a little large. Let's do 18. Okay, so hopefully this is a little bit more visible to you. We can just about get all of our data on a single page. So now, the issue here is that what do I want to know? So I'm going to calculate the mean and the median, so those measures of central tendency for the total arrests between 1998 and 2016, right? So the way that I might phrase this is to say is, what was the average number of arrests each year between 1998 and 2016, right? So why might we want to know the answer to this? Well, is a particular number of arrests unusual? Now, I want to point out that just even eyeballing this data, I feel like there's something a little strange going on. Why? Because the number of arrests that seem to be happening is a lot higher. We see the number drop by 50% between 2006 and 2007. Now, if these were actually the same reporting years, my guess is that we will find is that there is actually something that happened in terms of the way that these things were recorded between these 2 years, that there was probably a change in the recording, because I doubt that there was a 50% drop in arrests. But for now, we'll progress with this in sort of a functional way. So we need to do the mean and we need to do the median. Now, as I mentioned, we in a way we don't even really need the program year here. It's handy to have, but when we need to do the sorting, so I mentioned that we need to sort the data in order to do the median. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right off the bat. In order to do that sorting, the thing that I'm sorting on is actually not the year, right? So if we look at the year, then it's already sorted. But what we need to be sorting on the data point that we are trying to find the median of. So in this case, I actually want to be sorting on total arrests. So you can see that I've highlighted all of the rows. I did this by clicking into the row number here and then going down to the bottom of the data set. And we'll look in class at a couple of different ways that you can do that, especially with larger data sets. And so now I'm going to go to the data menu and choose sort. And it's going to bring up this window that's going to basically say, how do you want to do the sorting? So I'm going to choose sort by column. I'm choosing column B. You'll notice that it depending on how you make your selection, it may or may not give you kind of use the first row as a title. I want to sort on the values, and I want to sort smallest to largest. So what's going to happen here is it's going to reorder things. And interestingly, it is almost perfectly reverse chronological now. Not quite. 2001. We see that there's out of order here. That's okay, because again, we are not attempting to, we're not actually worried about the year at this point. It's interesting to keep this because it helps us understand, because this would let us kind of fold this back into our initial data set and say, wow, the year 2000, right, was like actually perhaps particularly an extreme year. So we don't want to lose that association, but that's not the basis on which we're going to make our calculation. So to do the mean is very simple, and you'll notice here, I'm going to go ahead and pump up the font volume on all of these columns. Okay, so what I'm going to do in every case is I'm going to write a label, and now I'm going to enter a formula that's going to perform the calculation for me. So with mean, right? Mean is the arithmetic mean. That's the one that we are mostly familiar with, which is add them all up and divide by the number you have. So anytime I want to create a formula, the signal to Excel that I want it to have a formula rather than text or a number or a date or anything like that is the equal sign. The equal sign says to Excel, there's a formula following. In this case, I'm going to use the sum formula, right? So we actually saw that it existed in our original data set in this case. The sum is exactly that. It's going to add up all of the values. And the way that I like to think of formulas is they're like recipes. So we're saying, look, I want to take the sum of something. Well, the question is, what are the ingredients? What ingredients do you want it to add together? And all of the ingredients for a formula always go between round parentheses. So I've created these round parentheses Yeah, and it's going to complain to me because I'm trying to move the cursor. So I can just say, so you see it's actually giving me a nice little hint, right? Number 1, number 2. Now, of course, I could do this. I could say, okay, start here, then add a comma, and then do this, well, this, right? That would be incredibly tedious. Unfortunately, is not necessary. So instead, I'm going to say sum. I'm going to open my parentheses here, and I can actually use my cursor, and now I'm going to select the first cell. And I'm actually, you can see I'm not dragging, okay? This is how I prefer to do this. If you have experience with Excel and you like to do this a different way, feel free. I like to just select the first row, and now if I hold down the Shift key before clicking in the last row, it will select everything between them. And you can see that if I go up here, it's actually used this colon, right? So I could even type this in. I could type in manually B2 colon B20. But in this case, I'm just going to do that. Did I get them all? Did I miss any? Hang on. Nope, looks like I got them all. And then I can just, and so I had to put that last round parentheses and I hit enter. And I hit enter. What happened here? Come on, guys. All right, something went silly here. Ugh. Let's try this again. B2, in this case I'm dragging. And you can see that it gives me the sum. I don't know, it kind of went glitchy there for a second. Okay, so it's giving me the mean. Well, this isn't the mean, right? Because this is actually just the sum. So what do I need to do? I need to divide it by the total number of records. Now, there are a bunch of different ways that I can get this. Counting is oddly challenging, I find, in this. One thing that I like to do is if I highlight, you can actually see in the top left corner that it says 19 rows by 1 column. So that's one way to do it. I could also look at it as the fact that my bottom row index, the number is 20, but I know that I have one row that is a header row. So it's going to be 20 minus 1 is going to be 19. So I have my sum here, and now I'm going to use the slash, which is for dividing, and I'll just say divided by 19. And I'm going to get this number. One thing that I want to look at here is the formatting. So I'm going to right click in the column and say format cells. And I just want to check that if there are decimal points that I'm allowing those. Generally 1 decimal point is going to be fine. We'll talk about determining decimal points, but it looks like this actually divides evenly, which is pretty remarkable. So that's the mean, right? Very straightforward. The next one is the median. This is even easier. We don't even have to have a formula for this. Because if I have 19 entries, right? So I have 19 actual rows of data points. I'm not concerned with my header row. If I have actual 19 rows of data points, then what is the middle? So the middle point is obviously going to be, I'm going to take 19 divided by 2. That's going to be 9.5. So I round up to 10. So I have an odd number. I'm going to round up to 10. And then the question, and so I want the 10th row. Now this is where it gets a little bit tricky with Excel because of course I have one row that is headers. So I want to start counting my rows. So I'm actually start counting it too. So this is my first row, second row, third row, fourth row, fifth row, sixth row, seventh row, eighth row, ninth row, 10th row, right? So the way that I like to think of this is I figure out what the middle row should be, and then I add the number of rows that should be excluded. So again, in this case, my total number of data rows is 19. I divide by 2, I get 9.5. I round up to 10 because it's an odd number. And then I'm going to, when thinking about the row number that I'm looking for, I need to exclude one row, so that's going to be row number 11. I'm going to go ahead and highlight this. And in this case, the median is simply the value that appears in that middle row. So the median is simply 53562. But actually, rather than retype that, I'm going to use a formula even here. And so with that equal sign, I can simply click on this cell and that value will appear there. Now again, why do I do this? We always want to do what we can to minimize any likelihood or any possibility of errors. One of the main errors that we get is transcription, right? I will transpose 2 numbers, put them in the wrong order. You always just want to reduce the possibilities for error, and that's where using the program you can really use the program to your advantage. So we're going to take a pause right now. I'm going to come back and we are going to look at finding quartiles. And maybe even the standard deviation. We might leave the standard deviation until next week, but we'll at least look at quartiles because, again, it's really simple to do, just counting, and then that will be it for this week. All right, see you back here in a moment.